blood spluttering through her words. I mean, what a complete psycho. It's called the judge. She was then forced to use another sword, then repeatedly punched her with blood pouring out and stomped on his face. His loaded gun to remove Jonathan's head. I guess that makes both of us liars. Forced her to stand on Jonathan's neck. You couldn't make it up, could you? The girls would see something awfully gruesome. Jealousy has a lot to answer for. Decapitating Jonathan's head. It had gone through his arm and into his head. How are you? How are we? Welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. If you're new here, I'm Victoria. I love all things sewing, all things true crime. I like to be busy doing a project whilst talking about a true crime case. I like to record it, put it together in some sort of fashion to bring you along with me. So if you saw my last video, I'll leave the link down below or up here. I made a relaxed, comfortable pair of trousers with a light pink striped material, and I'm going to today make a matching top to match it. It's going to be a vest with some ties, again from Unfettered patterns. I will leave the link below, and this is the top I'm going to be making. I've not done this design before, so I will be following my instructions. So grab yourself a brew, you know it's going to go cold. And let's jump right in. So our story today takes us to a super small town in New Hampshire called Jaffrey. With a population of around 6,000, it's a close-knit community where families often grow together. They stay together, they grow together. Nestled at the base of Mount Monadnock, I may have butchered that name, sorry if I have. Please correct me. With its sparkling lakes and its lush greenery, it's classed as a dreamy place to work and live. That's why when 25-year-old Jonathan Amerault didn't turn up for a scheduled work meeting on the morning of the 21st of September 2020, everyone, especially his parents, were worried sick. This is the horrendous case of Armando Barron. Jonathan L. Amerault was born in Rangeley, Maine on the 27th of January 1995. Born to Justine and Kenneth Amerault, he was their only child. Jonathan was raised in Milford, 20-odd miles from Jaffrey. He graduated from Milford High School and was the class of 2013, where he was the captain of the indoor and outdoor track. He then graduated with honours at Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT for short, where he was class of 2018, gaining a Bachelor's in Science degree in biomedical engineering. Now, what is biomedical engineering, I hear you say? Well, it's a scientist that applies engineering principles to solve medical and healthcare problems. It's a field that combines engineering knowledge with an understanding of human biology and medicine. So this led him on to having, a decent job. A job as a biomedical manufacturing engineer for a company called Telflex in the town of Jaffrey. He had love for the great outdoors, hiking, snowboarding, skiing, and he had already climbed at his young age 66 of the region's 67 mountains. He moved to Keene, which was only 18 odd miles from Jaffrey, and he owned his own house there. He brought it there knowing there was only a short commute to work every day, but that then he could stay close to the mountains he so loved. On September the 13th, Justine invited Jonathan over for dinner. It was during the pandemic and she knew he was quite isolated and she just wanted to spend some time with him. Here is where he told his mum Justine that he'd met someone from work and he was just talking to her. His face lit up when he was talking to his mum about her. He explained to his mum that they were just talking at the moment because she was going through a divorce and that she had children. He explained to his mum that he was happy to take things slow as she had just gotten out of a really extremely abusive relationship. He then showed his mum a picture of the girl he liked, and he even made a joke at this point and said, "She's got the hots for me, she has." And that girl's name was Britany Barron. Britany grew up in New Mexico, but she left home at 16 and had little to no contact with her mum or her other siblings. She did stay in contact with one of her brothers and would attend church with him. And it was through church with her brother that she then met one of his friends, Armando Barron. She was young and she had nowhere to live, so she moved in with Armando and his family. And after a short while of living there, Armando and Britany were told by Armando's mum, Maria Lena, that they were both living in sin and they had to get married. And so, after only being together a year, Armando and Britany got married. And they soon started a little family, and by 2018 they had 3 little girls together. So Britany, she also worked for Teleflex, and Armando would stay at home and homeschool the girls. And it was while working at Teleflex that she met Jonathan, and while they were working on a project together, they started to get to know each other a little bit better. They exchanged numbers and would have friendly conversations back and forth on Snapchat. And it was during these conversations that Britany had said to Jonathan that all she could currently offer him was friendship, because she was getting out of quite a nasty divorce, or going through a nasty divorce, and that her soon-to-be ex-husband had and was incredibly abusive towards her. But due to their friendship getting a little bit more friendly and a little bit more flirty, they decided on the 16th of September that after she had finished work at 3 p.m. that they would drive to a park and just spend some time together. So they went out of the back door of their work and into the back car park. And drove to a park in Peterborough in Jonathan's car. Initially, nothing happened. They just chatted about his work colleagues, his boss. This was in fact the first time they had ever spent any time together outside of work. And it was the first time they had actually gone out together. But on the way back in, they drove back around the back of the building into the back car park. And they did this so Britany could come out the front and into her car as if she had never left the building at all. And she did this because Armando was so controlling that she knew that it was a great possibility that he would be sitting in his car watching her every move. So for safety, they went round the back. And before she got out the car, so overwhelmed with kindness and Jonathan's ease and I guess just being happy, she shyly leant in, pecked him on the cheek, kissed him on the cheek, and quickly scurried out the car all shyly. Then on Friday, the 18th of September, during both their break times, they decided to meet up in Jonathan's car and share their break together. They talked about both of their works. They chatted about Jonathan waiting for a car part to come in to do a project. But it was clear both of them were starting to really care for each other. And this is where Jonathan then leant in to Britany for a proper full kiss. Blushing when they'd both finished their break, they went back into work and continued their conversation via messaging through Snapchat. And they continued messaging on throughout the evening as well. It was then the next day, so Saturday the 19th of September, that Armando had discovered that Britany was communicating with Jonathan. Armando had took Britany's phone to charge it, but they charged their phones in the bathroom. I guess in America you have those charging ports in the bathroom. We don't have that here in the UK. But he had took her phone to charge it in the bathroom. So knowing he had her phone, Britany rushed up and said she was going to take a shower. And Armando was like, no, I need to go to the toilet first. So he ran off ahead and shut the door. And then after a few minutes of Armando being in there, Britany knocked on the door and asked if she could have her phone. She could just sense that it was about to all kick off. And he shouted through, just a minute. So Britany turned and started to walk away. And then the bathroom door opened. Phone in hand, he screamed in her face, spit hitting her cheeks, shouting, "Are you fucking serious right now?" He then grabbed her by the throat and then slammed her down onto the bathroom floor. And then he started to choke her out while screaming and shouting at her, "I can't believe you. I can't believe you." She kept trying to grab his fingers. She kept trying to peel them off just to be able to breathe and get some air, whispering, panicking, saying she feels that she's going to die. He kept tormenting her, loosening her grip enough to get some air and then tightening his grip all over again. He then dragged Britany into their bedroom, shouting out to the children, "Go next door to grandma's." And this is where he then repeatedly punched her. Wild with anger, he grabbed his loaded gun, shoves it into her mouth, damaging her teeth, saying to her, "You know you're going to die tonight, right?" Then holding her at gunpoint, he told her to get dressed. And she grabbed whatever she could and she put on a thin vest top, pajama bottoms and some shoes. Shakingly, she looked at him and he simply said, "Don't do anything stupid or the girls will walk into something fucking gruesome." He then forced her into their cream white coloured Jeep, and then started driving to a net wayside park. On the way to the park, he started reading out messages between Britany and Jonathan, and after every single message, he would hit her in the face and head. Her nose bleeding so badly, he'd broken it, with blood pouring out, blood spluttering through her words. All she could say was she's sorry. And once they'd reached the park, believing he was genuinely going to kill her, he stops, pulls out her phone, and tells her, "We're going to message your little boyfriend." Pleading with him, she repeatedly told him to stop. No, he has nothing to do with this. But Armando pulled into a space, and with his gun pointing right at Britany, told her, demanded her to get into the driver's side of the car. He then messaged Jonathan, asking him to meet and pretending he was Britany. Two hours later, Jonathan arrived, and as his car, a Subaru, was pulling in, he forced Britany to flash the headlights, and in her flashing the headlights, blinded Jonathan's view slightly. Jonathan spotted the car and drove until he got about 20 foot in front of the car, and that's where he saw Britany's swollen, tear-stained face. He jumped out of his car, as Armando did too. Armando approached Jonathan with speed, and he just began hitting Jonathan, screaming in his face, "You're trying to fuck my wife!" Anger completely took over him at this point, and as Jonathan fell to the ground, Armando started kicking him and stomped on his face. Voice strained, Jonathan pleaded with Armando, saying he would never see Britany or talk to her ever again. Armando responded with, "Damn right you won't." Britany was screaming, and she was trying to push Armando off Jonathan. And this is where Armando grabbed his gun and forced it in Britany's hands, and with his hand over hers, told her to shoot him. Britany refused, so he forced her at gunpoint to stand on Jonathan's neck, sobbing. She could hear him struggling to breathe. Armando then forced Jonathan to get up and get into the back of the car, and then, still holding Britany at gunpoint, forced her to pick up the machete that was in the car and start cutting Jonathan's wrists. And after he had watched her do that, he then forced Britany to get into the front of the car. Once Britany was in the front of the car, he then turned the gun back to Jonathan. With his gun now pointing at Jonathan, he asked Jonathan if he knew what the name of his gun was, and Jonathan said no. Armando said, very cutly. It's called the judge. How ironic, huh? Armando then grabbed Britany by the hair, pulled it back so her head was lifted right up, and asked Jonathan, "Do you still think she's pretty now?" Jonathan looked at Britany's blooded face, swollen eyes, tear-stained, and simply said, "Yes, I do." Armando, enraged, pointed the gun back at Jonathan. Jonathan shouted, "Wait!" panically. He said, "I thought you said you were going to let me live." Armando pointed the gun at him and said, "I guess that makes both of us liars," and then shot him 3 times. Now, while this was all happening, Jonathan's mum, on Saturday the 19th, had messaged Jonathan twice about his granddad's birthday, but he hadn't responded and it wasn't like him. So she started to worry a little bit. But it being a Saturday, she thought she would hold off and just wait and see if he responded later on. When later on came, she phoned his phone and it just went straight to voicemail. A little worried, she said to Kenneth, "He's still not answered or picked up." And they agreed, mutually agreed, it's Saturday, he's probably on a mountain, we'll get back to him. On Sunday the 19th of September at around 9:30 a.m, bear hunter Brian James had gone to check on some bear traps that he had set in a large, remote, heavily wooded area in northern New Hampshire. And as he drove down the road and rounded the corner, he could see 2 vehicles up ahead of him. One was a black, smoky Subaru and one was a white cream Jeep. And the Jeep was following the Subaru. The 2 cars come to a stop, and they forced Brian to have to stop too. And he noticed the man in the Jeep had gotten out and had walked around to the driver's side of the Subaru and was talking to somebody in the Subaru. So, because it was a live bear site, he picked up his gun, his loaded gun, to be safe, got out the car and started to walk towards the bear site. And the Subaru then sped off, leaving the man who was standing talking to this person in the Subaru just there. So that man started walking towards Brian. Brian with his gun just said, "Hey, I'm just here, I've got some bear traps down there, live bear traps, I'm just going to check on them, that's all I'm here for." Just letting him know, I guess, just putting it out there. He is walking around with a gun after all. Just putting it out there, that's what I'm here doing. And so then Brian carried on down towards the bear trap. He took in that the man that he'd just seen had I think it's because it's so out of the ordinary, with it being a live bear site, it was so out of the ordinary. So as he was walking down to the bear site, he had took the information in that this person that he'd just seen had dark hair, had dark beard, had a moustache, but that he was also wearing a hat with a really wide beam around it, almost as if to cover your face. Brian stated that he was down at the bear site trap for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then when he walked back to his car, nobody was there, there was no one in sight. Monday the 21st came and Justine still hadn't heard from Jonathan. There had been no communication at all. So Justine headed over to Jonathan's house in Keene. And while she was travelling over there, she called up his work and spoke to the receptionist. And the receptionist told her that he hadn't arrived in at work yet. And on agreeing that it was out of character for Jonathan, the receptionist then put Justine through to HR. Justine then asked HR, Miss Jennifer Bell, if she knew anything of his whereabouts, or if or what mountain he said he was going to be hiking that weekend. Jennifer had mentioned that he hadn't said anything about climbing a mountain that weekend, and that she too was concerned because she had a meeting scheduled with him that morning and he hadn't attended. And then upon check-in, noticed he hadn't appeared for work either, and that was so unlike him. Justine, a little panicked at this point, went over to Jonathan's house and had started talking to his neighbours to see if they had seen anything of him that weekend, and they all confirmed none of them had seen him that weekend. So Justine went in the house, had a look around. There was no sign of him being there. So she called her husband, Kenneth, Jonathan's dad, and explained that he wasn't at home, work hadn't seen him, he hadn't shown for a meeting, and she explained at this point that she was really quite concerned and quite worried. And this is where Kenneth suggested that she go and check and see if she can find his hiking shoes. And thinking that was such an amazing idea, she ran through to the garage as quickly as she could, hoping not to see these shoes. Only what was right in front of her was his muddy hiking shoes, meaning he hadn't gone hiking. So a little frantic, she sent over a message to Jonathan's good friend David Wilson and asked if he had seen or heard anything from him. And David had said that he hadn't seen or heard anything from him since Saturday night. And then with that, she then called the Keene Police Department. She explained about his shoes, about not being in touch and how it was so unlike him, and how he hadn't tipped up for work either, and that nobody had heard from him since the Saturday evening. So the police decided to ping his phone, and his phone was last pinged late Saturday evening in Jaffrey, and it was at this point that Justine decided to call Miss Jennifer Bell back, HR, and she just said, did anyone else mysteriously not come in today? You know, anyone else with long brown hair? And Miss Bell said somebody else hadn't come in for work today, but due to data protection she couldn't tell her who, but she could only tell the police who that was. So once detectives had that information, they went and spoke to HR. And this is where they found out that Britany had oddly phoned in that exact morning and quit. Now, police thought this was a bit odd. So they headed over to Britany's house. And it was like a row of bungalows. Over here we call them bungalows, but they were like a row of houses attached together, and it's here officers started knocking on Britany's door, only for the house's door next to them to open. And this is where they find out that Armando's mum lives there. Maria Lena lives there, and she tells officers or detectives that they're not back yet. They went camping and they're still not back yet. Now officers turned around and left, but they left a bit uneasy. We had a missing Jonathan. We had a Britany who had handed in her notice and quit work. We had an Armando and Britany who were also not around to talk to, and officers felt very uneasy, so they left. But they did notice that there was no cars in the driveway. So a bit later on they decided to just drive past on the off chance, And when they drove past, it was here where they saw the white cream Jeep that belonged to Armando and Britany, and a gold Toyota Tundra, I think it's called. For this purpose, I'm just going to say Toyota. I'm not great with saying some car names, so we're just going to call it a Toyota. And so they saw also on the drive a gold Toyota belonging to Armando's stepdad. So they decided to pull up onto the drive and go have a little chat with Armando. Armando explained that due to them having some marriage difficulties, he dropped Britany off because she was going to have a few days away. So he dropped her off at 2 a.m. in the morning at a campsite where she would be spending a few days camping out with her friends. And so officers said, okay, what friends? And Armando could not tell them the names of her friends. And so officers pressed him a little further and asked why Britany would call in and quit her job. And this is where Armando said, I'm not sure why everyone's so worried about this. I've quit many jobs and left many jobs. Nobody's come looking for me. And this is where detectives then told him that they couldn't just take his word for these things and that they would now be looking for her too. It was then on Tuesday, the 22nd of September, that Brian James and Dave Sylvia drove back to that bear bait site. And it was there where they saw a tent, a blue tent. And quite shockedly, they toot their horn, and this is where they saw a woman quite noticeably shaken, wearing big sunglasses to cover up her face. And so they proceeded to explain to her that she couldn't be there. This was a bait site. It was extremely dangerous and very illegal to camp there. And so Britany then apologised and said she'd move on. But with her face being so hidden and her being so shaken, and of course being out in the middle of nowhere in the woods near a bait site, they felt really uneasy about it. So they then, once they'd left the bait site, drove a little further up the road to Errold, where it's the only place you could get signal for your phone, and that's when they called out the Fish and Game Conservation officers. Fully cold. So, officers arrived at the bear site. And they told Britany she had to leave because she was trespassing. Now, having noticed her big massive sunglasses and her shaky demeanour, as she walked past, she muttered to herself. She muttered, I'm in big trouble. And officers went on a bit of high alert, and they turned around and they asked her, what do you mean? And she just said, I'm in big trouble with Armando. Officers, a little perplexed, started looking around. And this is where they noticed drag marks in the mud. And their eyes followed the drag marks. And this is where they found a mound with brown tarp covering something with branches all over it. They immediately took Britany in for questioning. And while they were in questioning her, officers had lifted up the tarp and found Jonathan's car. And then they found another one, and they looked under it, and this is where they found a decapitated human body. It was then here at the station that Britany gave detectives a step-by-step detailed explanation of what had happened that gruesome evening. She told them how Armando had used her phone to message Jonathan to lure him to the park. She explained the horrendous attack and assault on her and Jonathan. She explained how Armando had stomped so violently on Jonathan's head, how he had tried to force her to join in, and when she couldn't, he held her at gunpoint and forced her to stand on Jonathan's neck. How Jonathan had begged for not just his life, her life too, by saying he would never see or talk to her ever again. She went over how nothing, no matter what they were saying, nothing was working. Armando just carried on. How he forced her to use a machete on his wrists, on Jonathan's wrists, and then finally forcing Jonathan into the back of his own Subaru car. She explained that it was like somebody had completely took over Armando, and no matter how much pleading and begging, just nothing was touching him, nothing was getting through to him. And that how after all of that and all of their attempts, Armando still then fatally shot Jonathan in the back of his car. Officers asked her what happened then, and she told officers that Armando had forced her to drive the Subaru with Jonathan's body in the back all the way back to their house to pick up supplies and camping supplies, and she had had to do this all while Armando was driving right behind her in the Jeep. And then once they had the supplies they needed, he then forced her to drive the 200 miles back to a remote location and a remote campsite, all while under the threat of not doing something stupid because the girls would see something awfully gruesome, and keeping her on the phone the whole time, so she was unable to make any phone calls. So still in complete shock and fear, she continued to drive, and she continued to comply. Once they were there, she tells detectives how, still at gunpoint, he forced her to use the saw that she had got from home to remove Jonathan's head. And when the saw stopped working, she was then forced to use another saw and another knife until she managed to get through and decapitate his head. He then forced her to bury his head. I mean, what a complete psycho. Jealousy has a lot to answer for. He then forced her to wrap up his body in tarp. He turned around and walked towards the car, and as he opens the door to the Jeep, he simply turns around and says, "You deal with that. I'll come back again soon." She tells detectives how she shakily covered the tarp in sticks and little bushes to be respectful, and that how in that moment, with tears streaming down her eyes, her mind racing, she was in a shocked, frozen state, and all she could do was just put one foot in front of the other. So on hearing this, detectives then put out a search for Armando Barron. So detectives then put out a bolo, be on the lookout for Armando's car, the cream white Jeep. And this is where they then find the car abandoned in the back of a business estate or industrial estate car park, just left there abandoned. So police seize the car. And because it was abandoned and they seized his car, police then call him. And of course he doesn't pick up, he doesn't answer. But what he does do a little later on is phone them back from a completely different number. This number was linked to his stepdad's phone. And when he is on the phone, detectives explain to him because Britany is missing and disappeared, They need him to come in and just answer a few questions and help them a little bit. So when officers are on the phone to him, they explain to him that it's really quite important that they talk to him. They want to find out some more information about Britany's whereabouts. It's a disappearance. They need to know where she is. And could he meet them? And he tells them, no, I can't. I'm sorry. I would love to, but I'm on the way camping with my girls in the car. I want to go and talk to them about the divorce and explain to them what's happening. So officers, understanding that, you know, kids in the car, this could be quite difficult, they offer to meet him halfway, and Armando responds with, nah, that won't do either. I don't want my children seeing me talking to the police. You couldn't make it up, could you? I'm sure with their mum missing, your daughters would rather you be talking to the police so you could find their mum. And so then with that, officers then press him and tell him how vitally important it is that they meet up and have a talk to find out so they can, so that he can help them. And he eventually agrees to meet them back at Jaffrey with a time and a place, and to no one's surprise at all, he doesn't tip up. He doesn't go to the meeting. I've done it wrong. It wouldn't even be a So True Crime session if I didn't have to unpick something, would it? Right. Let's get it unpicked and I'll be right back with you. Now, where were we? So, detectives worried because they knew he had his children in the car with him, his daughter in the car with him. They started to track the mobile phone he was using, and they could see that he was going in the completely opposite direction. And he was in fact going through Franconia, and so detectives could see clearly he had no intentions of meeting up with them. So officers did what officers do best. They then got a search warrant and started to go to his home and started to do a search of his home. But it was during this search that they spotted that the gold Toyota belonging to his stepdad was missing. It wasn't on the drive, and on talking to Maria Lena, Armando's mum, they found out that he apparently had left with his daughter. He'd gone out to do some food stockpiling because it was during the pandemic, but he'd gone out the day before at 10 o'clock to go to the grocery store, and he hasn't yet returned with his daughter in the car. And so with that information, officers then put out a second bolo on the gold Toyota, and it's not long before it's then tracked and picked up. Armando was driving with his 9-year-old daughter in the passenger side next to him, and inside the car, in plain view in the back, officers could see topsoil, quick dry cement, shovels and a blue tarp. There wasn't one piece of grocery shopping in that car. Armando was then arrested immediately for the assault of Britany. It was noted that he had scratches on his arms and lots of dry blood on his wrists and hands. And when officers told him that he was being arrested, he instantly asked for a lawyer. His daughter, although was 9, was interviewed, and she confirmed that she had heard her parents arguing days prior, but that her grandma came in and got her before she could see or hear anything else. Later that day, Britany then led detectives to Annette State Park. And then took them to where they would find the rest of Jonathan's belongings, and then led them to a shallow grave where his head was buried. Then Britany herself was then arrested. Britany was arrested, but not for murder. She was arrested for falsifying evidence, and she was charged with 3 counts. Count 1, cleaning Jonathan's vehicle. So cleaning the evidence out of his car, the blood and everything like that. Count 2, wrapping Jonathan's body in a tarp and dragging it into the woods. And count 3, decapitating Jonathan's head. So she still did time in jail, prison. She took a plea deal, and her cooperation with the case placed her at the centre of Armando's trial. Jonathan's autopsy showed that he died from a gunshot wound to his head, but that even though he sustained multiple gunshot wounds, there was in fact only 3 bullets used. He had gunshot wounds to both thighs, 1 in his left arm, and 2, 1 being fatal, in his head. It is believed that the gunshot wounds to his thighs may have been caused by 1 single bullet going into one thigh and exiting out of the other. It is believed that the gunshot wound to his arm had entered in through his elbow, and due to him trying to protect himself, it had gone through his arm and into his head. And then the 3rd shot was the fatal shot. It was at close range. It showed that he sustained multiple deep cuts to his head, deep cuts to his wrists, a split lip with lots of swelling and bleeding, which indicated he had taken a blow to his mouth, and it was that hard that he had literally pushed his mouth through to his teeth, and his teeth was trying to penetrate through his lips. He had bruising to the back of his fingers, defensive ones. The medical examiner did state that once he had been shot with the fatal shot, the close range shot, he would have been rendered unconscious immediately, and then he sadly died within minutes. He had been stamped on his face, and there was an imprint of Armando's shoes on his face, and then he was decapitated. Evidence was collected at the scene, but it was also collected from all 3 cars. The bullets found inside Jonathan's head and around matched that of the revolver found in Armando's stepdad's gold Toyota that Armando was using at the time he was arrested. Fingerprints and a palm print was found on Jonathan's spoiler, the back of his car, that matched those of Armando. There was dried blood in the Jeep, in the back seats, in the middle console, on the passenger seat and the glove box. This was tested, and it was consistent with what Britany had explained when she was being beaten in the car. Surveillance shows Armando's white cream Jeep heading towards Annette Wayside State Park, followed by 2 hours later Jonathan's Subaru entering the park, which is consistent with the messages sent luring him to the park. At the burial site, they also found the knife saw, the hacksaw, and the multi-purpose knife used to decapitate Jonathan. Everything was tested, and it all come back with Jonathan's blood on it. During the trial, the defense tried to turn it around and say that the wrong person was actually being charged for murder. They tried to put it all on Britany, saying that she had planned and plotted this all along. But the jury after not even 2 hours deliberating, found Armando Barron guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping, and he was sentenced to a life without the possibility of parole. And that is the horrendous case of Armando Barron. Let's look at today's make. It's a little bit big and loose, but I'm going to be honest with you. In the UK at the moment, we have some strong heat, so I'm actually okay with that. And the trousers to match. A nice little set here. I may at a later date pop some extra darts in. I will leave the link to this vest top. Don't go off my measurements. I like my clothes quite loose anyway, but I will leave the link in the description below or in the pinned comments. And I do apologise if you can hear a little seagull. We live by the sea and there is currently a baby seagull on my roof near my chimney. So it's got a little nest there, and the mum and the baby have been having a bit of an argument all day. So I'm sorry if that's been interrupting. So all that's left to do is bid you farewell. Take care of yourself, take care of others. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll see you back here next week with a new project and a new case.